So let's talk about something from Parshas Vayechi. How many of you, by the way, plan to be buried in Israel? Just curious.
None of us plan to die.
I got news for you. It's going to happen to all of us at some point. The question is, what is the basis for burial in Israel? And the answer is, it's from this parsha. Yaakov says to his son Yosef, "Unesatani mimitzrayim ukvartani b'kvuratam." I want you to take me out of Egypt. I want you to promise me that you're going to bury me in Eretz Israel. And Yosef swears to his father. His father makes him swear, Hishavali, Vayishavalo. And Yosef therefore transports his father to Eretz Israel. Based on this has been the tradition that many Jews have had for centuries to transfer their remains to the land of Israel for burial. We also know from the Gemara that those who are buried in Chutz La'aretz, in order for them to be resurrected at the time of resurrection, their bodies are supposed to apparently roll all the way to Eretz Israel before the resurrection. So if you want to save yourself a little bit of rolling time, the benefit of being buried in Eretz Israel is you get resurrected without having to be schlepped all the way for thousands of miles underground before the time of the resurrection. I'm not sure what to make of that Gemara, to be honest with you, but that's what the Gemara says. So there are many people whose motivation is, I don't want to roll. I'd rather just get up when it's time to get up. According to this tradition, resurrection will only be in Eretz Israel. So what?
If one doesn't believe that, then they really don't believe in the basis of Judaism, do they?
If you don't believe in resurrection?
Well, if we don't believe in that, you're going to roll to Israel.
Well, there's another tradition that you might subscribe to, which is that resurrection will take place everywhere, not just in Eretz Israel. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're rejecting the basic tenets of Judaism. But this particular Talmudic tradition says that the resurrection will take place in Israel, so all bodies that are in Chutz La'aretz will have to somehow move to Eretz Israel before resurrection. Yes?
Will the resurrection take place all at once for everybody?
It seems to be
at a time as they arrive in Israel.
It seems to be what the tradition is that resurrection is instantaneous for everyone. Yeah. So on this basis, the Rambam writes in Hilchot Melachim as follows. This is source number 1. Amru Chachami, Kol hashochein be'eretz Yisrael avonotav mechulin. Our sages told us that anyone who lives in Eretz Yisrael, his sins will be forgiven. Shenamar, as it says in Isaiah, Uval yomar shachein chaliti, that a resident of Yerushalayim will no longer ever have to say, I am afflicted. Ha'am hayoshev ba nasu avon, because the nation that dwells in the Holy Land will have their sins pardoned. And the Rambam says even further, Afilu halach ba arba amot zoche l'chayei olam haba. Just walking 4 cubits in Eretz Yisrael gives you a goodly portion in the world to come. V'chein hakavur ba nitkaper lo. And similarly, if you are buried in Eretz Yisrael, this creates an atonement for you. U'cheilu hamakom shuhu ba mizbeach kapara. And it's as if the place in which you are buried acts as an altar of atonement. Shenemar, as it says, v'chiper admato amo. As it says that the earth shall atone for his people. In other words, just being in the earth of Eretz Israel creates an atonement for the individual, so it's a very desirable thing. Uvepur anutu omer al adama tmeya tamut. And it's considered to be a punishment to die in a foreign land that is filled with tum'ah. Ve'eno domeh kol tato mechayim lekol toto achar moto. However, says the Rambam, with all of that I've just said, you can't compare someone who is offered sanctuary by the land of Israel while they're still alive versus someone who was only offered sanctuary by the land of Israel only after their death. It is far preferable to live in Eretz Israel before you die than to die in Chutz La'aretz and have your remains transferred. Ve'alf al piche, nonetheless, Gedolei HaChachamim hayu molichim meitehem lisha, great scholars would transport their dead to Eretz Yisrael. Tzei ulamad mi Yaakov Avinu v'Yosef HaTzadik. And you can actually learn, as two examples, Yaakov Avinu made Yosef swear that he would bury him in Eretz Yisrael after he died. And Yosef also, before he died, again in this week's Parsha, he made his brothers promise that they would bury him in Eretz Yisrael. And so what was the first thing that Moshe Rabbeinu did when it was time to leave? Moshe went and fetched Yosef's remains and brought Yosef's casket out as the Jews were leaving Egypt to make sure that Yosef would be buried eventually in Eretz Israel. Okay? Now, this therefore seems to be the prevailing attitude, which is better you should live there when you're alive. But even if you don't make it there in your lifetime, it's considered to be a desirable thing to be buried in Eretz Israel because in some way your body and soul receive some level of atonement or spiritual cleansing by being buried in Eretz Israel. However, now that we've mentioned that, we should also point out that there is a conflicting opinion in the Talmud Yerushalmi. The Rambam is quoting from the Talmud Bavli, but it seems like the Talmud Yerushalmi disagrees with what we've just said. Source number 2. Rabba Bar Karya v'Rebbi Elazar havun metailin be'isterin. These two sages, Rabba and Rebbi Elazar, were once strolling in a town called Isterin, and it seems like it's a border city into Eretz Yisrael. Ra'u aronot shehem ba'ot michutz la'aretz la'aretz. And they noticed that there were funeral processions which were transporting human remains from chutz la'aretz into Eretz Yisrael. Amar Rabba Bar Karya l'Rebbe Elazar, ma ho'ilu elu. He says, what good are these people doing? They're not doing good. Ani korei alehen v'nachalati samtem l'to'eva b'chayechem. You have placed my land of inheritance as a place of rejection or a place of despicability. In other words, you've rejected Eretz Yisrael in your lifetime and you only come here after you're dead. That's not a good thing, right? Vatavo'u vatetamu et artzi b'mitatchem. And further, you have come and defiled my land upon your death. So you're doing two things wrong, according to this tradition, by having your remains transferred to Eretz Yisrael. Number one, you're demonstrating that you didn't have enough regard for Eretz Yisrael to actually try and live there, and you only want your body taken there after you die. And number two, you're adding tum'ah, you're adding impurity to Eretz Yisrael by having your corpse transferred to the land of Israel. Your corpse is tameh. Your corpse is a source of ritual impurity, and you're adding that to the land. Amar le, kevin shemagi'in la'aretz hayunot gush afar umanichin al aronan. So Rabbi Elazar said to him, and I'm not sure whether he's actually trying to defend the practice, but he says that when the caskets are brought to Eretz Yisrael, they immediately take a clump of earth and they place it on the caskets. And the reason why they do that is to show how much they endear, how precious Eretz Israel is to them. Dichtiv v'chiper admato amo, that his land will atone for his people. So you seem to have two different attitudes towards the two different approaches to burial in Eretz Israel. One was Rabbi Bar Karya, who was contemptuous of this practice. You didn't have enough regard for it in your lifetime. Now you're adding tumah to the land. And Rebbe Lazar, who seems to be going like the Rambam was saying, is that no, the land itself can atone for any impurities that a person may have acquired over the course of his lifetime. Third source, and this is what we're going to see from the Zohar now. Amar Rebbe Yehuda, Yaakov Amar, V'shachavtiyem avotai unesatani mimitzrayim ukvartani b'kvuratam. Rebbe Yehuda quotes the Torah, where Yaakov said to Yosef, I want to lie with my fathers, you shall therefore carry me from Egypt and bury me in their burial sites. So Taman Taninan, Man denafek nishmate birushuta achra. So the Zohar says that if a person expires in another land outside of Eretz Israel, the gufa delay itkabar ba'ar kadisha, and then has his remains transferred to Eretz Yisrael for burial, alei ketiv vatavo'u vatetamu et artzi v'nachalati, samtem l'toeva, that you have come and defiled my land, and you have placed my inheritance, Eretz Yisrael, as an abomination. You haven't really shown it proper respect. If anything, you're showing it disrespect. So the question then, of course, is, how could Yaakov request burial in Eretz Yisrael if this is a negative thing according to this tradition? V'Yaakov amaru kvartani bikvuratam v'nishmate nafka birshuta achra. So how could Yaakov do it? How could Yaakov die in Egypt and demand to be buried in Eretz Yisrael if this is considered to be an abomination? So the Zohar answers, Amar Rebbe Yehuda, Shaini Yaakov de Shchinta Havat Achidat Bei V'itadabkat Bei. Yaakov was different because the Shechina was connected to him and cleaved unto him. That's the end of the Zohar. So Yaakov was the exception. With normal people, the attitude of the Zohar is that it's not considered to be a good thing to have your remains transferred from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael. But Yaakov had justification for it because the Shechina attached itself to him. Now, what does that mean? It's not really clear what this means. So we have to try and figure out what's going on over here. So we're going to take a look at Rav Kook and see what he has to say about this. He says as follows: ובזה יש לומר מה שהקשה בזוהר הקדוש, הרי אמרינן על המתים בחוץ לארץ ועולים ונקברים בארץ ישראל ותבואו ותטמאו את ארצי. ולמה היה כן באבינו יעקב עליו השלום? He says, if it's considered to be a defilement of Eretz Israel to have your remains transferred there for burial, how could Yaakov have himself buried in Israel? ולפי דברינו יש לומר שעיקר הטומאה מה שמוציא נפשו ברשו אחריו. So he says, let me explain to you what's going on. How is it, or why is it, that when someone dies in Chutz La'aretz, there's an impurity that is cast upon the body? Why does that happen? Hu mipnei shetzrichim lihimachek mehanefesh tziyurei ha'olam hazeh, umemela mitchadshim ba tziyurim chadashim. Rav Kook uses a very interesting language. He says, when a person expires, when a person passes away, their neshama has to in some way readjust by having all of the images and thoughts and memories of this world be sort of reprogrammed. We have to sort of, God says, all of the images and memories of this world need to be erased, and you need to be implanted with new images and new memories of a new perspective of reality. That's what happens to a person's soul when they die. Im kain, kevan shechutz la'aretz eino kedai lechochma yetera ki rak avira d'Eretz Yisrael machkim, im kain haroshem hachadash she'al hanefesh eino b'tahara, al ken hu metamea ta'aretz achar kach. But when a person dies in chutz la'aretz, that transition, where all of a person's prior memories are erased and new images are implanted into the neshama, does not happen in the proper way. Because the only place where the neshama can get a proper readjustment of its images, of its memories, is in Eretz Israel. And therefore, if a person dies, the memories really remain of this world, and the images and the perspectives of this world remain within the person's soul and hover and linger around the body. And that is what causes tum'ah to remain in a body that passes away in chutz la'aretz. Ma she'en ken Yaakov Avinu alav hashalom shelo meit, v'lo hayta nafsho tzricha klal lekabel tziyurim chadoshim, ki kol tziyurei nafsho bidveikuto b'chol pe'ulotov, hakol hayu kodesh kadoshim. He says Yaakov was different. Our sages tell us that Yaakov never really died. And we're not going to go into a deep exposition about what that means. You can either take it literally or figuratively. But when we say that Yaakov never died, what it means is that his soul, even when he was in this world, was not filled with images and memories of the mundane. Yaakov's mind and Yaakov's soul was filled with memories and images of an otherworldly plane, because he was already so lofty while living in this world. Everything was holy. Miyuadim umiyuchadim eliluya tachlita elyona niskava anirtzeit legabei ein chiluk klal bein makom lemakom. And therefore, because Yaakov did not need this reorientation of images in his soul, there was it made no difference where he died, whether he died in Chutz La'aretz or whether he died in Eretz Israel. Rak shetzarich liot shareh ba'avir hakadosh keroi lo, אבל לא שיפקום נפשו מצד כוח ציורי חוץ לארץ. He says, and that's what made Yaakov different. His body did not have any of the taint that a person's body normally acquires when it dies in chutz la'aretz, because the taint that is acquired through the sort of the lack of implantment, proper implanting of proper images and memories, that the soul should be able to see things clearly and accurately. Yaakov was able to see things clearly and accurately even in Chutz La'aretz. He had an otherworldly perspective. So it didn't make a difference where he died. His nefesh was never filled, his soul was never filled with any of those impure images that would create a defilement if you brought his body to Eretz Israel. And that's the reason why it was appropriate for Yaakov to have his remains transferred to Eretz Israel, even if normally you shouldn't have your remains transferred to Eretz Israel. And he goes on to say, I'll just say this outside, he goes on to say that the other sons, not only Yosef had their remains transferred to Eretz Israel, but the other sons also did. According to tradition, every one of the 12 sons of Yaakov had their remains transported from Mitzrayim and was reinterred in Eretz Israel. I don't know where all of these burial sites are. We know where Kever Yosef is, in Shechem, but I'm not sure where the other burial sites of the other Shvatim are. I just don't know where they are, if we have a tradition about it. But that's according to Talmudic tradition. And what's interesting, he says, is that they needed to go through a decomposition of only having their skeletal remains transferred over to Eretz Israel. Because the more decomposition that takes place, the more there is a burning away of any of that remnant impurity that is a result of the soul not having the proper images in its very being, in its mind. So perhaps Yaakov's sons, who may not have been on the same level as Yaakov himself, they needed to go through further decomposition before their skeletal remains could be transferred to Eretz Israel. But Yaakov himself, his fresh corpse, could be buried in Eretz Israel because his skeleton plus his body, his flesh, were so pure and didn't contain any of the mundane images and perspectives of this world, so that they didn't contribute any impurity at all, and therefore there was nothing wrong with burial in Eretz Israel. So this is a very difficult halachic discussion, because normally we encourage people to be buried in Eretz Israel. We say there's no better place to be buried than in Eretz Israel. And as the Rambam himself writes, that this is a way of getting some level of atonement for yourself if you have your remains transferred to Eretz Israel. But it's still, we can't overlook the fact that there is a completely opposite tradition, which is that unless you're on the level of a Yaakov Avinu, where your whole perspective on life is so lofty already that you will not be adding impurity, your body will not contain any impurity whatsoever, and therefore can be transferred to Eretz Yisrael, there is what to be concerned about as far as it being perhaps a negative thing. So what's a person to do? The solution is very simple. You make aliyah, and that way, when you die, you'll die in a state of purity, and you won't have to worry about having your remains buried in Eretz Yisrael. Seems to be a very simple solution, right? So that has to be the goal. Questions, comments? Yeah.
I have a practical question regarding modesty. I saw on Facebook a picture of people that I care about, and it was so inappropriate. It was well intended maybe, but so inappropriate. Is there a way to tell them? I know, like they would resent if I say it.
If you think they're going to resent it, then you just have to use wisdom in deciding how to communicate it. If they're going to resent it, then it's better not to say it. Sometimes, as our sages say, just like there's a mitzvah to say that which can be heard, there's also a mitzvah not to say something which cannot be heard, or that the person's not able to hear. So even though even though you'd like to make sure that they don't do it again because it was inappropriate, but if they're not going to appreciate what you're trying to communicate, it's better not to say it, because it'll only create enmity. It'll only create a rift in the relationship. Yes?
When one does a tahara, before you close the aron, you sprinkle Israeli earth inside the aron.
It's for that reason, yes.
Is that minhag or is that halacha?
It's minhag. It's not halacha. But it's based on this Talmud Yerushalmi that we saw. V'chiper admato amo. That the earth itself creates atonement for the nation of Israel. So just to have even just a small amount of dirt sprinkled over your remains creates an atonement of some kind because of the holiness of Eretz Israel. Yeah. Yes?
They now bury in Yerushalayim, they bury this like irons, like this, it's not in the ground.
Oh, no, but it's still in the ground. It's still in the ground. Yeah, they built a whole new, they're called kuchim.
They look so awful.
Yeah, well, what they've done is that they've run out of space for burial. So they've created a huge complex where they've dug underground and they bury people on levels. But everyone's stuck into the earth. It's just that when you go underground, it looks like they're in the side, but it's only because you're underground, you're not above ground. So everyone that's buried is buried in the ground. It's just that they're buried in layers, you know. Yes.
What about for those Jews who don't know better and they chose to be cremated? What happens to, will they be resurrected as well? Or?
So there is a tradition that if a person willfully chooses to be cremated, they do not arise at the resurrection. But that's only if they knew. Look, there are Jews who were cremated in the Shoah, in Auschwitz.
But they didn't choose.
They didn't choose. a lot of times people choose based on ignorance, and so it's probably the same thing as someone who was burned in the crematoria. Yes?
How do we arrange that, should we die here before we get to Israel, that we get buried there?
Well, there are services that you can get in touch with that can arrange for burial in Eretz Israel. There's, like, for example, Mizrahi has a whole a plot for Canadian Jews who would like to be buried in Israel. You can reach out to Mizrahi; they can help you.
Mizrahi here?
Yeah, Mizrahi Canada. Yeah. I'm sure there are other services as well. All right, have a wonderful day, everyone.